Hey everybody, it's Lee here. I'm going to go ahead and start up with lesson 6 for the introduction to Nahuatl lesson series. And so today is going to be about the layered meanings of nouns that derive from verbs, part 1. There are a few different nouns that do derive from verbs, and so we'll be looking at a few of those. We're going to start with the li words, so all the words that end with li. So if you think about it, there are actually quite a few words that end with li, such as kali or malinali. There's really common ones. And so we're going to be looking at some examples. And so we'll get to look at a few words. But the really, really important thing, remember, this lesson series is designed to help you understand now what worldview and philosophy, right? And so when I learned about these words from my Tlamach ticket, it was really mind-blowing because I didn't know that you could have a noun that came from a verb. And so what tends to happen is, you have the noun, and if you ask any Nahua speaker today, they'll know what the word means. A good example is tonalpohualli. Tonalpohualli is a very, very common word in the Nahuatl speaking world because it means food, right? And so if you ask a Nahuatl speaker what is tonalpohualli, they'll say, oh, it's comida or food. And everybody agrees that that is what it is. However, where the layered meaning comes in is if you look back to the noun that it's derived from, because since it ends in li, it's derived from a verb. Well, we can actually track down that verb, and sometimes it's straightforward. Other times it's actually a little bit more complex because the verb can mean different things, right? And so these are really, really valuable words, especially those of you who are really interested in etymology, learning about the origin of words, how they came about, what's the deeper meaning of a word, and we'll talk about some words that are really connected to the spiritual world as well. So those of you who are interested in that will really enjoy this lesson. I just want to say thank you to all my patrons and Patreon. If you are interested in supporting my work, please click the link in the description. Any little bit helps. I do incur research costs, and I do make sure everything that I'm teaching you is accurate. So I do have costs related to talking to Nahuatl speakers and that kind of thing. So if you like what you see, you like the lesson series, please consider supporting it through the Patreon link. So here we go. So I started off with tonalpohualli because, like I said, it's a very, very common word. And this is a good place to start because the verb is tlaqua. Okay, so I'm going to use this word to just kind of explain to you briefly the rule in which a verb can become a noun. And so the way the rule works is you just take a noun, a transitive noun. I'm sorry, I meant verb. You take a transitive verb, and then you just add li to the end. Okay, so tonalpohualli, just like that. Tonalpohualli. Okay, so when you do that, what's happening is you're changing the meaning. Tlaqua means to eat. Or you can say, let me put an example here. Say one tlaqua. Okay, so this is a sentence. Okay, Juan tlaqua. This means Juan is eating something. Okay, this tla means something, and this qua is eating. So Juan is eating something. Okay, or Juan eats. That's what that means. So we can use that in a sentence. Tlaqua can be used for the third person. Okay, you're talking about somebody else. Now, what happens is if you add that li, it changes the meaning. It no longer means to eat. It's now literally the outcome of eating something. And so it's it's no longer a verb now, right? Like it's a noun now. We converted this verb into a noun. And so that's the purpose of this li ending. Okay, you're changing the verb into a noun. And so in this case, nahualli, like I told you before, means food. Why? Because food is the outcome of eating something. Okay, so something that has been eaten, the outcome of being eaten, it's food now, right? So it's something that we, for example, have eaten before, and therefore we know is edible. You can think about it as something edible as well. The nahualli is something edible, something that our ancestors ate and passed down, and so therefore, when you ask a native speaker today, it means food. But if you look at the etymology, it means the outcome of eating something. Okay. So that's the rule. It's a very easy rule to understand. All we have to do is remember we're looking at transitive verbs. Transitive have to have something in front to specify either a person or a thing that is being acted upon by this. Okay, so quas eats, you're eating something. I mentioned the smallest verb in the Nahuatl language last week. It was, or not last week, the lesson 5. And there was E. E, just one letter is a verb in Nahuatl, and it means to drink. Okay, and adding the tala in front, tala'i means you're drinking something, to drink something. Okay, or somebody drinks something. Therefore, following the same rule as before, we can say, well, tla'ili, if we add an ally to the end there, well, that means that which has been drank. So it's the outcome of drinking something, and that's known as a beverage. So all Nahuatl speakers today will understand that a tla'ili is a beverage, is something to drink in the general sense, right? It's not specifying water, it's not specifying any kind of drink. It's just to drink something in general. Okay, so that's why it's just a beverage. So now we're going to get into a little bit. I mean, these are pretty straightforward, right? It's just, okay, I drink something, and the outcome of drinking something or that which has been drank, it's a beverage now. Like it's something that we know we could drink. And so again, this is in the general sense. Now we're going to get into a little bit more complicated words, because sometimes words, the meaning does not really match the verb that it came from, right? And so we have to ask the question why, and we have to figure out, well, okay, what happened here? And so the verb, identifying what the verb is going to help us to figure out where that word came from. And so this one, malinali, I had the hardest time with this one for a very long time. I realized, in my learning, that everybody says malinali is grass, right? Everybody. I mean, native speakers will say it, scholars will say it. Everybody agrees. If you ask them what malinali is, they say, oh, it's grass. Okay. And so all the dictionaries as well, the dictionaries, they all say the same thing. And so people would say, all right, everybody says it's grass. Well, it's grass. Well, it's actually not grass. And the way that I started to figure this out was, well, in Spanish, grass is zacate, right? Zacate. Well, that comes from the Nahuatl word sacat. And so sacat is grass, like zacate. And so I started thinking, well, if sacat is grass, then it doesn't make sense that malinali would also be grass, right? And so I started to wonder about that. And so I said, well, it has the li, right? So you have a question about it? Well, we could figure it out because we could find the verb. Now, sure enough, the verb here, malina, right here, malina, is something. It's a verb. It means to wind or to twist. And an example is given is like to twist a cord around the leg above the thigh, perhaps in the nature of a tourniquet. Okay, so just any action where something is winding or twisting, we use the word malina. Now, you add an ally to it, and that means that it's something that has been twisted, right? Or the outcome of something being twisted. Now, I looked in all of the sources. I have all of the codices, like the Florentine Codex, on my computer, so I can plug it. They're all searchable, so I can plug in a word and find all the instances of that word. Well, it turns out that malinali is a very uncommon word. They didn't really write about it too much in the 1500s, and so, well, if it's not in the books, like I was looking for malinali in context. Like Molina is like he was a linguist. He made a Nahua dictionary, and so a dictionary entry is a little different uh, than reading about it in context. But I could never find any entry of Malinali in context. Nobody was ever talking about it. And so I thought that was very strange. And so I asked several people, everybody just kind of said the same thing. Oh, it's grass, until I asked, oh, let me ask my Tamachtique. He's Victoriano. He's a pretty prominent Nahua teacher. He's from the Huasteca region in Veracruz. And I just happened to ask him. I said, I'm going to ask him, see what he says. And right away, he knew the answer. He said, yeah, malinali is not grass. He said, it's a twisted plant or a vine. So he said that in a general sense, it's like any plant like this. Any plant like this that is kind of winding and twisting, and you see how it's kind of grabbing and twisting around. Any plant like that, any vine that has the capability of grabbing and twisting, he said that is what a malinali is. And so it made perfect sense. Sometimes we get so hung up on, the books and the sources and all of these things. But this just shows you the power of like making that connection with the indigenous communities and asking them, like they live in those communities, so that they're using Nahuatl on a daily basis. So they use malinali and they know that malinali is distinct from sacat, just like I had suspected. And so it makes sense that this type of plant has this root, malina, because it's winding and it's twisting. Okay, so this is just an example of like a word, malinali, everybody just takes it for granted that it's grass, right? And it's something that everybody agrees on. But if you look at the ending, you know, oh, automatically there's a verb involved here. What's the verb? Oh, here it is. And then you can start to investigate and figure it out. Once I saw this, to wind and twist, I thought, well, that doesn't make sense that grass would be twisting and winding, and the grass doesn't do that, right? So it doesn't make sense. And then now we know, what this word means. So that's just an example of a little bit more complicated one, but it just shows you the power of understanding the ally ending and understanding that we can investigate further besides the dictionary entry of that word. We can find the other multiple layers of that word. The next one is another food related one. This is tlaxcali. Tlaxcali is tortilla. So, but there's an ally there, right? So I said, okay, well, let's see what this comes from. It comes from the verb tlaxcaloa, which means to make tortillas. Okay, this is a very common verb, as you might imagine, in Nahuatl speaking communities today, because making tortillas is still a prominent practice. And so this is the verb. So a tortilla or tlaxcali is a tortilla, but if we're looking at it through the lens of this rule, well, it's literally a prepared tortilla or a tortilla that has been prepared, right? And so, again, a multiple layer of meaning there. The next word is tonalli. Now, tonalli is interesting because It's one of those words that has multiple meanings. There's a lot of words like this in Nahuatl, and these words are very fascinating because you look at it and it's like, wow, there's so many different meanings, right? Look at this. There's so many meanings. So how do you know what people are talking about, right? Well, it all depends on the context. If you're talking about somebody, the tonalli that the day you were born on, and you're talking about that, well, you're talking about the day sign on which someone was born, and by extension, we're talking about someone's lot, fate, portion, or share. This is like, you know, whenever I conduct a reading for a tonalli, this is like explaining to the person, hey, you were born in this day sign, this and during this tercena in this direction, under the guise of these teteo, and this is what it all means, right? And so that's one meaning. You also have day. This is the most common use of this word, tonalli. You know, you say, oh, quali tonalli, it's a good day. It's a good day, right? So it's used quite frequently to mean the day, but it also can be used to refer to the sun. I told you in one of the previous lessons on the teteo that tonatiu, for example, tonatiu, you can see that it's related to this word here. And so you can see how it can be in reference to the sun and the heat. So let's take a look at the verb, because the verb's going to tell us why this noun has so many different meanings. So look, dona is for the sun to shine or to give heat. That's what the verb in the word means, dona. So dona is a very, very important word, and it's referring to the sun shining and the sun giving off heat. And so therefore, by extension, you know, that's why it makes sense that all these other words can come from it. Because if you're talking about dona, tonalli, well, that's the outcome, right? It's like the after the fact. Okay, the sun was shining, the sun gave off heat, and so now this is the outcome of that. What is the outcome of the sun giving heat and shining? It's summertime. It's the day sign you were born on. It's solar heat, the sun, and the day. So as you can see, this is why there's so many meanings, right? Because it's like all of these could be possible outcomes of this particular verb. And so we can say that the tonalli is the outcome of heat that was given off from the sun. And so, yes, tonalli means day, and in the context of it, we can all understand, and now what speakers will understand. However, this is a more profound understanding. It's a multi-layered understanding. Now, if you understand tonalli as the outcome of heat that was given off from the sun, well, a day takes on a new meaning, doesn't it? A day is literally it's the heat for that day that was given off, and so it's the outcome. And so when our ancestors thought of the day, when they thought of the heat, when they thought of the day sign you were born on, there was always this connotation of heat, right? And heat is what gives us life. The heat and the light gives us life. And this was a common theme throughout the Nahuatl philosophy. And so this is a very, very important word as a result. Anything that's related to the day, the sun, or heat, is going to be something that's a really positive thing. Okay, like fire, for example, right? Or heat, for example. Or even a day sign Olin, for example. Olin is the name of the sun for Olin, Nahui Olin, the current sun. And so therefore, even the day sign can carry on the connotation. Okay, so there's a lot of different connections there, but that's tonalli. So I wanted to contrast that with tonalpohualli. Okay, so this is another related word. This one is going to combine two different verbs now. Well, I mean, in a sense, you know, the tona is there, but Since it's tonal here, it's actually, this is a noun, right? Tonalli, because we know that when you put a noun and a verb together, the ending is dropped. So they just dropped the li here. So in this case, it's a noun and a verb. Because boa, and I'll write it in the modern fashion. It's boa. Boa is a very interesting verb because it can mean two things. It can mean to count, or it can mean to read. Okay, so again, depending on the context, if you're talking about a book, you're saying amoshli, newa amoshli poa. Okay, newa amoshli poa. Well, you would say, well, I am reading a book, right? I am reading a book. Or poa, remember, it refers to a third person. So you can say that somebody else is reading a book, right? If there's a book in the sentence, well, you know that you're talking about reading. But if there are numbers, usually you're going to be talking about counting. So in this case, we're talking about numbers because the tonalpohualli is made up of 260 day signs. And so in this case, it would be more accurate to say the outcome of the days that have been counted. Okay, so once the days have been counted for 260 days, the full cycle, then we know, okay, that is a tonalpohualli, the outcome of counting all of those days. And so that's what that word means, tonalpohualli, the days that have been counted. Of course, a lot of people will come up with different descriptions. A lot of the scholars like to say, well, it's a ceremonial calendar, right? It's the calendar they use for ceremonies. If you understand the calendar, though, we know that the tonalpohualli is more than that, right? It's intertwined with the siupohualli, which is the yearly count, yearly calendar. So it's used as a ceremonial, but also it's used as a solar calendar as well. And so that's tonalpohualli. Another example with counting, this one's interesting because it's the same verb, pohualli, you have the li ending there. And the sem here is referring to one time. So pohualli is the outcome of counting one time. And it's referring to 20. Okay, so it's a one full count, presumably based on a count of the 10 fingers and 10 toes, all the digits of the body. This is the word for 20, okay, because if you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way through the numerals, well, the 20 is considered to be a full count, sempohualli, and then you continue on from there. You have sempohualli, 1 se, 21. Sempohualli, 1 ome, 22. And then you go on there until you get to 40. And then when you get to 40, it's omepohualli, because it means that you've counted 2 times now. So it's a base 20 calendar, right? Well, in this case, we're not talking about the calendar, we're talking about the number system. So it's a base 20 number system, which is in contrast to the Western 10 digit. And so as a result, every time you count to 20, that's a new cycle. So sempohualli, omepohualli, egipohualli, nahuipohualli. So you're going 20, 40, 60, 80, right? And you just keep going. And so that is a really interesting word, but we're talking specifically about counting numerals rather than the calendar. So 2 different ideas. Here's one that is in contrast to the day. So yowali means night. This is a nighttime, okay? Yowali, and so it comes from this verb right here, yowa. Yowa is a verb that means to become night, to be night, to grow dark, for darkness to fall. Okay, so this is a verb. And so this is a noun, night. and this is the verb that it comes from. So therefore, nahualli is the outcome from growing dark. In other words, it's nighttime. So once again, to contrast the day, night is defined by darkness. Okay, and so we can see that it's the opposite then of the daylight. So the night is associated with the lack of heat. So therefore, the cold, the dark, everything that is mysterious, it's black, so we can't see. That falls into the category of night as well. And so basically, there's going to be more negative connotations when it comes to the night. And so that's a critical part of the philosophy. You have anything related to the day is going to be real positive, and we're going to want to gravitate towards that. Nahualli, it's going to be a little scary, and we don't want to. I mean, it's more negative, so we don't want to, focus on those things too much. And so, like day signs, for example, there are some tonalli that are very strongly associated with nahualli, such as mikisli, death, and those kinds of things. And so, it's a really good way of understanding how the really positive and negative aspects of the worldview derive from. This is one. I think this has got to be my favorite now what word. This is just a really, really great word. And for a long time, I really struggled with it because I first learned about it when I used to read Carlos Castaneda back in the day, when I was in college, and he talked a lot about the nahualli, but he used this word. So yeah, Carlos Castaneda, he kind of I mean, he was definitely a fraud. He everything he wrote was pretty. I mean, he falsified it, and that's been proven many times over. However, all the thing, he said he was with a Yaqui elder, and he was, going through these experiences, learning these things. But they actually found out in all the days that he said he was with Don Juan, he was actually in the library. So he wasn't just kind of making things up out of nowhere. He was actually reading. You can actually see the books that he was checking out. All this has been documenting. And so he had knowledge, he knew some things. And so for me, it's a work of fiction, but at the same time, he used this word nahuatl, he used it properly. And so and that was the a result of his studies. Nahuatl is just a variation of nahualli. Okay, so nahualli it means a lot of things. This is a very, very complex word. But the two main things that it does mean is it can be referring to a person who, for lack of a better word, we'll say he's a brujo. Okay, so brujo, or it can refer to a brujo's animal double. Okay, those are the two different meanings for nahualli. And so, a brujo does things to community members. Maybe he could, in our tradition, either they could go two directions. They can either go and become a healer, or they can become someone who harms people, right? So either way, most of the time the emphasis is on the harmful aspect of it, probably due to Christian influence and things like that. But let's just take a look at this. I think here we go. There is such a variety of definitions for this. Malinali, everybody says it's grass, right? But for nahualli, everybody says something different. So some of them say it's a sorcerer, a shape changer. Some even say it's a spirit or an animal form of a shape a person could take, right? And so Molina, he was writing in the 1500s. He says witch, a brujo, which is what it's more commonly known as. But as you can see, there's multiple definitions depending on the context. What are we talking about here? And so we're going to look at the verb. The verb is right here. It's nahual. nahualtia. Okay, so nahualtia right here. So this is the verb, and so this is what the verb means. It means to hide oneself, protect oneself with something, to hide in the shadows, to hide behind someone. So a lot of different definitions, but the common theme there is like to hide, right? To hide. Now, there's also the root of nahualtia is yet another verb here, nahual, and this is to transform, to convert, to transfigure, to disguise, to reclothe, to mask oneself, to camouflage, trick. So this is why there's so many multiple layers of meaning for this word, you know, because there's two different verbs that are contained within it. Okay, and so therefore, a nahualli is the outcome of hiding, or transforming oneself. Okay, so that's what that means. So once again, it could either be the person that's doing those things, the person that is hiding, concealing, tricking, all of those things, or it could be the thing that has been you have been transformed into. Okay, so it's the outcome of transformation. So let's say your animal double is a jaguar. Okay, so the jaguar that is you is the nahualli. It's a nahualli because it's the thing that has been transformed. Okay, and so it could be the animal. It's always an animal. You know, hawk, eagle, jaguar, even crocodiles. There's all kinds of animals, dogs, opossums. You know, there's so many that one could transform themselves into. But the key here is that they're linked together, right? So if you're transformed into a possum, the possum is you, because you've it's the same person. It's one and the same here. So that's why it's very complicated to explain, right? Because yeah, there's an animal double and there's the person that is hiding behind the animal double, but they're the same thing, right? If the animal in the tradition, this is a tradition that they still have today in the Nahua communities. It's a very strong tradition. If the animal is hurt, then the person who is the animal, who has transformed into the animal, is also hurt, so that they're connected. And there's actually a lot of really cool stories from the 1500s. And there's a particular book. The author is his name is Alarcon. If you're interested in learning more about this, he actually gives detailed stories of things like that. You know, like this guy. I remember there was a story. This guy was on a boat and he killed a crocodile, and then at that same moment, the person who the nahualli that was connected to that crocodile in her house, she said, "Oh, somebody shot me. I'm dead." You know, and she named the person who shot her, and it comes to find that it was the same person who shot the crocodile, right? And so there's a lot of stories like that from that book. I don't remember the name of the book, but if you're interested, you can ask me and I can tell you. I don't know whoever's interested in it, but there's other words for nahualli también. There's like tlacatecolo. This is an owl person. They mean the same thing, okay? And so it gives us further insight into nahualli, looking at the words that mean the same. Owl person, because the owl, going back to Yowali, is associated with the night. And therefore, anybody who's associated with the night or is working at night, you know, they tend to have powers that they derive from death. And so that's what this is referring to. That's why they're an owl person. Another one is the Yolokwani. This is really cool. The Te part is people. The Yolo part is the heart. And the Kwa is eat, right? So the Ni is just the person. So it's the eater of hearts of people. It's a really cool word. So you can see that one in maybe the one that's like tricking or hurting people, right? The other one is te tlachi uyani. Te tlachi uyani, which means he or she who does things to people. So we can see a similar construction here. You have the te, that's the people part. The tla is something. The ni part is someone who does that thing. And then here's the verb in the middle. Chibuya does things. Chibuya. Okay, so that's nahualli. And the last one is just another example. This one is sewali. Sewali, it means the shade cast by something. Okay, so this is the shade cast by something. And so that's a noun, but it's got an li, so we're going to look at the verb, which is sewa, the sewa part. Sewa means to be cold like the weather, okay? To be cold like the weather. And so this one is interesting because this is the shade, and this is giving it a further layer of meaning because what it's saying is that it's something that has the outcome of something that is cold. And so usually something in the shade is going to be cooler than something that's in the sun, right? And so that's the connection there between the verb. Now, I do want to point out that there are some words that end with li, but it's very, very difficult to find out the verb that it came from because the word is so old. Okay, so I'm going to use gali as an example. Gali, well, it's got the li ending, so we're good there, li. But there's a problem here. Okay, gali is a very old word, and before Nahuatl was a distinct language, right? It was part of the Uto-Aztecan family. So at some time in the past, linguists estimate that it was maybe about 3,000 or 4,000 years in the past. There was not a Nahuatl language. The Nahuatl language was the Uto-Aztecan language. Okay. And this was a language, again, spoken 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, that was spoken by many people who lived together. It was a language that was distinct from Nahuatl. However, some of the words in Nahuatl are so old that they they derive from this language, the Uto-Aztecan language. Gali is an example of that. Gali is a lot of people say it means house, but that's more like a classical definition, which is not wrong. It's house. But if you ask a Nahuatl speaker, okay, they will say that a gali is not a house. A gali is a general structure. Okay, and so a gali could be a house, yes. However, a gali could also be a building. A gali could also be a school, right? It just depends on what that general structure is. The word, if you want to say house, like in modern times, the word for that is chantli. Chantli. Okay, so this is the word for house. And so, since this word gali is very old, we know that it's old. My tlamachtiket told me that there's a word in Uto-Aztecan language. It's very similar to this word, and it means the same thing. It means house. And so what happens is, if this word is derived from the Uto-Aztecan language, which was thousands of years ago, the Uto-Aztecan language had different grammar rules, right? It had different verbs and nouns and different ways to merge them together. And so some words, therefore, may or may not have a known verb. Okay, for this one, I was convinced. I said, wow, you know, if you look, this is the verb, ga, right? I said, oh, this is ga. And I was pretty convinced of that because it made sense to me because ga is a verb that means to be present somewhere. And so I said, okay, well, what's the outcome of being present in a place? Well, the outcome of being present in a place is you have a house, you have a gali, right? And so I was pretty convinced of that. But when I proposed it to my tamashtika, he said that it was possible, but highly unlikely, and more likely that you know it's an important word, and so therefore the verb has been lost through time. Okay, so that's just a word of caution. Not all words are going to be very easy to find the verbs of. Okay, so you have to do a lot of work if you want to, you know, study a particular word with the ally ending. All right, that's lesson 6. Next time, I'm going to tell you about another word ending or a word stem that it comes from a verb as well, and it means something. It's a verb converted to a noun. But for now, we'll stop here. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you all. I'll see you later.